conspiracy theory, trust me when I say the examples I've seen of predictive programming in kids' television are weak. Like, sticking with that unnice 2001 New York thing, let's go through some of the most popular examples of, quote, proof that some secret society organized it decades in advance and put hints all over media about it. Let's see, a 1978 episode of Super Friends with the Legion of Doom making a tower bend a little, a 1985 episode of G.I. Joe where a plane hits two it doesn't even hit them. It parks. An episode of Spider-Man Unlimited where two pillars get knocked down. An episode of Gargoyles where there's a blast on the top of the World Trade Center in a show based in New York. Wow, what a surprise. They used the tallest building. There's a scene in DuckTales where a plane knocks over some statues, and one of my favorites, a background movie poster in Johnny Bravo with a building on fire. Look at it. Look at the proof. Secret agents must have snuck in one night and drawn that burning building on a poster just so kids would remember that in 7 or 8 years and then be like, oh, I saw that in Johnny Bravo, so that's normal. It's just absurd. Like, there's a 1994 episode of Iron Man that had a terrorist plan to fly some hijacked planes into the Pentagon and the World Oh. But the truth is, nobody is brainwashing kids with predictive programming. They do it with advertisements. Between 1946 and 1980, kid-targeting advertisements in the US were somewhat limited by broadcasting rules. But in 1981, the FCC began dismantling regulations on ads for kids, which paved the way for what is now sometimes referred to as the era of 30-minute commercials. Companies could make a toy, then make a TV show about the toy, then air commercials for the toy during the TV show about the toy. And they could line up 2, 3, 4 hours of programming like this back to back to back. In the first half of the 1980s, cartoons featuring merchandise characters increased over 300%. And I'm not just talking about action figures, although I'm definitely also talking about action figures. Snacks, posters, stickers, clothes, lunchboxes, McDonald's toys, everything. Even talking teddy bears like Teddy Ruxpin and his creepy-ass live action show, around which you could even advertise the toy. Eventually, the Children's Television Act was set up to limit commercials to kids during prime time, so luckily, that's not a problem anymore. But the reason I'm talking about toys, well, I'm not suggesting that all merch-driven shows were inherently bad. They weren't. Lots of them were engaging, memorable, and well-written. Like I said earlier, I loved Power Rangers, and that was basically one big toy commercial. The problem is that a show's success, even today, often relies on how much tie-in merchandise it can push. Good shows, great shows, got cut because they couldn't push toys. And maybe we should expect better from the kind of entertainment— oh, son of a— I'm on the soapbox again. Child stars. Yeah, we probably knew this topic was coming eventually. Let's go back before Disney Channel stars and 90s sitcoms, before television, to the 1920s, 1921 specifically, and it's the big premiere of Charlie Chaplin's classic film, The Kid. But it's also the diving board for a new star's career, the 6-year-old Jackie Coogan. After starring in the film, Coogan would go on to a prolific child career, making around $50 million before his 18th birthday. But upon reaching adulthood, Coogan, to his horror, found that most of his money was just gone. His mother and stepfather, a man who was also his financial advisor, had blown through all of it on booze, luxury items, and cars. In the 1930s, you had Shirley Temple, who referred to some of her earliest time in the industry as, quote, a cynical exploitation of our childish innocence. On one set, if she acted up, she was put into a windowless, soundproof box affectionately titled the Punishment Box, like an actual physical punishment box. Throughout her teen career, Temple was groped, harassed, sometimes straight up attacked by various scumbags. Once by a producer who, during a meeting with her, engaged his remote control door lock, a thing no Hollywood producer should be allowed to have, by the way, and literally chased her around the room. It's so over the top and evil that it's almost funny, but it's not funny because it actually happened. Oh, and just like Jackie Coogan, Temple would have most of her money squandered by her parents before her 18th birthday. And don't even get me started on Judy Garland in the 1940s. Almost everybody's aware how she was mistreated while working on The Wizard of Oz. Her parents, the studio, the director, everybody treated her like crap. And because some people on the production were worried that the 16-year-old Garland didn't look young or thin enough, this girl, they pumped her full of amphetamines and cigarettes to keep her looking thinner. Garland never quite managed to shake her childhood treatment or the substance abuse, going broke and passing away from an overdose in her late 40s. In the 1950s, there was Bobby Driscoll, whose young performances so impressed Walt Disney himself that Driscoll was put under the company's very first acting contract. Even if you've never heard of Driscoll, you've probably heard his voice as the titular character in Peter Pan. But once Driscoll hit puberty, typecasting led to work in the industry just drying up. In fact, he only learned that his Disney contract had ended when he drove up to the studio gate and was refused entrance. Unable to find steady work again, he fell into substance abuse, lost all of his money, and passed away at the age of 31 from an overdose. By the 1970s, the entertainment industry had noticed that a lot of their child stars were ending up not alive, so they enacted a series of regulations on childhood working conditions. Think reduced working hours, financial protections, mandatory supervision, all great things. But even with these positive changes in the industry, there are still plenty of awful conditions and practices that child performers are subjected to. Plenty of kids still grow up to find that a lot of their money is just gone. The most famous example probably being Gary Coleman. That poor guy, people were stealing money from that dude his whole life, from childhood to old age. Did you know that this is true? They had to postpone his funeral because people were too busy fighting over the estate he left behind. And it wasn't even that much money. And it's not just finances. Some child stars have been subjected to outright physical abuse on set by parents, with studios looking the other way to avoid trouble with CBS. Plus, having a professional relationship with your own children can complicate your actual relationship. In a 1998 paper published in the Journal of Personality Assessment, children performers were shown to feel far less connected to their parents who manage their careers than those of normal kids. That disconnect, that inability to open up to their own parents, among other factors, is making it so much easier for kids to become the targets of countless child predators in the industry. And sometimes predators come in ways you wouldn't expect. For example, in the 2014 documentary An Open Secret, parents of child performers talk about how they often find their kids' headshots and model pictures they'd only sent to casting directors being sold on online auctions, sometimes for hundreds of dollars. Kids that aren't even famous. And even if a kid manages to get famous, have some good roles, have parents that are supportive but not overbearing, avoids predators, and eventually decides that they want to leave the industry, well, even that's tricky. In a 2013 article written by Maura Wilson, who you recognize from Matilda, Mrs. Doubtfire, and more recently the faceless woman who secretly lives in your house from Welcome to Nightmare, Wilson points out that many child stars literally grow up surrounded by the industry, with everyone they know being connected to it. Plus, they're often discouraged from prioritizing their own educations over acting gigs, so how do you escape them? Well, a lot of them can't. Instead, they stick around believing that they're trapped and turn to substance abuse and alcoholism and poor life choices and sometimes choosing to end their lives. I'm not going to name off every former child actor that's done this, by the way, because I think that would be in really poor taste, but it also feels in poor taste not to talk about it. And there's a lot of them that have done this. And if we're being honest with ourselves, we're all just kind of numb to it, aren't we? At this point, most of us are more surprised when a former child performer comes out of the industry normal than we are when one takes their own life. How messed up is the industry? How messed up are we that this is our status quo? You know, after everything we've looked at today, not just the child star stuff, but everything, it would be understandable if you came away feeling a little depressed about kids' television. At least that's how I was feeling when I was making this. For months, all I did was spend my time diving into all the horrible, dark rabbit holes, the stories of abusers and victims and cover-ups and bullying and controversies and lawsuits and a lot of stuff that didn't even make it into this video because it was just too damn dark or depressing. While working on this video's research and script, I started wondering, Why was I even making this? Am I creating something just to depress people? Just to make them feel bad about the shows they loved as kids? What's the value of content like this? It got so bad that I even started thinking about trashing the whole project and doing something less miserable. Until one night, when I ran across a video. This is a video recording of a 1969 Senate hearing. A hearing that was put together with one single goal: to decide whether or not the U.S. government should dramatically cut its $20 million public funding for PBS. You remember PBS, right? We mentioned them a few times in this video, that they air free public educational programming for kids. And like I mentioned earlier, they desperately rely on public funds to make that happen. And if the Senate hearing went badly, those funds were about to get slashed. Leading the hearing was Senator John Pastor, a notoriously tough man with an equally notorious reputation for eliminating any government spending he thought was wasteful. And during the Senate hearing, he was becoming very clear. He wanted PBS on the chopping block. Over several days, Pastor had listened to the testimony from various officials, executives, childhood educational advocates, and other people begging, pleading with him to keep PBS funded. You have to understand, PBS was the only free educational programming available to a lot of kids at the time, especially for kids in low-income families where something like Sesame Street might be the only educational content they had until entering first grade. But Senator Pastor wasn't having any of it. In preparation for the hearing, he actually hadn't watched very much of PBS's lineup, and with each passing speaker, he only seemed to get more and more aggressive with his questions. He would interrupt speeches, criticize, and challenge every opposing viewpoint. After all, in his mind, children's TV was all cartoons and violence and mindlessness. You know, children weren't learning from that garbage, so why should the government be paying for it? Things looked pretty bleak for PBS until the final day of the hearing, when somebody from PBS, in perhaps the most hopeless Hail Mary in television history, asked one of their newest show hosts to speak up, to do something, anything to help convince Senator Pastor not to cut their budget. And the man they asked to talk...
It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine? Would you be mine?
Was a young Fred Rogers. For those of you who don't know him, Fred Rogers was the host of the children's television show Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Airing alongside Sesame Street and other PBS content, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood focused on teaching very young kids, 2, 3, 4-year-olds, about simple stuff in life, like what firemen do, what a hula hoop is, that sort of thing. But even with how young his audience was, Mr. Rogers believed kids would have questions about more complicated topics. So sometimes he would discuss things like divorce, or racial relations, or disabilities, or even sometimes accepting death. But he managed to talk about those things in a way that helped kids feel informed but safe, which is incredible. Rogers hosted his show for nearly 40 years, and by many Americans, this man is practically deified as a beacon of kindness, humility, and respect. But in 1969, Mr. Rogers was not the established, beloved figure he would later become. Most people, including the gruff Senator Pastor, had never even heard of Rogers' new show. Yet here he was, with the weight of educational programming in the U.S. all on his shoulders. And he accepts the mic. Rogers takes out his prepared statement letter, but decides instead not to read it out loud. Dozens of people had read their statements to Pastor already, to no avail. So instead, Mr. Rogers just talks to him. He talks to him about trust, about how important it is to impart to children, to give to children, and how it's something that he wants to teach kids about on his show. Mr. Rogers says that he trusts Senator Pastor will read that statement later on in his own time. Pastor, still irritated from the last few days of the hearing, quickly snaps at Roger with,
"Will it make you happy if you read it?"
But Mr. Rogers quietly and politely says, no, he just wants to have a conversation. So that's exactly what they did. Rogers tells Pastor about the simple life lessons they try to teach on his show, things like haircuts and family and everything. Throughout this talk, Pastor seems a little taken aback. He doesn't interrupt Rogers like he had with previous speakers. He doesn't challenge Rogers on how every dollar is being spent every single moment. He just listens. Rogers talks about how this show tries to impart to children how they have value, purely on the virtue of being themselves. Roger talks about the drive he has of giving children that gift in life, that gift of being told that you're wanted, a gift that they might not be receiving from anybody else in their lives.
I'm proud of you, you know that. I hope you do.
And then, do you know what he does? Mr. Rogers, this little nobody in the big Senate hearing, this Pennsylvania bumpkid David out of local access television in front of the Goliath senator, in front of the hearing, in front of the country, he reads the lyrics of a song he wrote for kids.
Could I tell you the words of one of the songs which I feel is very important?
Yes.
What do you do with the mad that you feel when you feel so mad you could bite? When the whole wide world seems oh so wrong, and nothing you do seems very right. What do you do? Do you punch a bag? Do you pound some clay or some dough? Do you round up friends for a game of tag or see how fast you go? It's great to be able to stop when you've planned a thing that's wrong and be able to do something else instead and think this song. I can stop when I want to, can stop when I wish, can stop anytime. And what a good feeling to feel like this and know that the feeling is really mine. Know that there's something deep inside that helps us become what we can.
As Rogers finishes, there's a very brief moment of quiet. Then Senator John O. Pastor, the hardened Washington bureaucrat, looks at Mr. Rogers, and he smiles, and he says,
Looks like you just earned the $20 million.
you could argue that what Rogers talked about and sang about on that day, the words themselves, they didn't matter. Those weren't what convinced Pastor. No, it was seeing an individual with a genuine passion for the real inner needs of kids. Pastor knew that the money for PBS, well, it was never going to make financial returns, but it could be going to someone sincerely devoted to helping young children learn and to teach them that they have value every single day. And $20 million is a small price to pay for that.
There's only one in this wonderful world.
The story of that hearing, well, it reminded me, yeah, there's an ugly side of kids' television. There's controversies, dangerous ads, horrible industry practices, but the majority of people who work in kids' TV are the ones we didn't talk about today. The fiercely dedicated creators, writers, animators, crew, performers, directors, and more that do their best to create something special that speaks to kids, to create media to help kids understand how to process their feelings, to learn about something new, to be told they have value, to see that they aren't alone in their growing experiences, to be told it's okay to be who you are, whoever you are, to joke about the impenetrable world of grown-ups and all their silliness, to enjoy the weird and the quirky, and maybe even for a young kid who always felt like he didn't fit in, to come home every day after school and have something that made him feel less lonely. As for David Yost, well, you'll be happy to know he's in a much better place now. He was, in time, able to embrace his homosexuality and would return to the industry as both an actor and as a producer. And not only that, but he's gone on to use his Power Ranger status to raise money for the Children's Hospital AIDS Center and to promote the No Hate campaign, which advocates for LGBT plus acceptance and equality. He was able to turn a terrible part of his life into a platform to help others who were going through what he himself went through. And maybe most exciting for me, while I was making this video, it was announced that Yost is coming back to Power Rangers. That's right. Yost as Billy is coming back for the 30th anniversary season premiering next year, I think, and I cannot tell you how hyped I am about this. And I know, not everything in kids' TV is pretty, but after all the crap David Yost dealt with all those years ago, then using that suffering as a way to help people who suffered like he did, and then to make a return to the show in this new, healthier place, well, there's nothing ugly about that. Good night, everybody. Thanks for watching. Bye.